This is a Samsung fridge side-by-side freezer fridge. This fridge has only got the one evaporator coil. A lot of the Samsung's twin cooling have two coils, but this is only the one coil. And the operating system is also electronic, which has failed. I've taken it apart. You have a defrost, a coil with a defrost element in the freezer, and there's one single fan motor up on top here, and on this side there is no coil or anything. This is the air vent, and there's a damper in there. It relies on the one single fan motor that blows air across there. And behind the fridge, this is the electronic board that controls it. Now this electronic board is faulty. We cannot get a new one. So I'm going to convert this fridge to operate without this board. And I'm going to run it with a defrost timer and a thermostat and a few other little components. Now the first step I have to do is this fan motor down here, the condenser fan motor and the evaporator fan motor are low voltage fan motors. They work on 12 volt, and because I'm not going to run it with the low voltage anymore, I replace both fan motors with 220 volt fans, and then after that I'll show you how I convert this onto a different operating system. This is the evaporator, the condenser fan motor. Once I put a 220 volt motor in, this is the motor that I took out there. They put it inside a little plastic chamber which clips on there, and the cord they use, it works with 3 wires. It's a low voltage motor. So this is the 220 volt fan motor. I get them from Uruki, and what I do is this little bit on the fan motor, I tap a thread on it and I stick it through the hole, and I put a little nut on there, and this little fan now is 220 volts and it fits down here. I'll put it in there, and the 220 volt connections from the fan I'll run to the compressor. So when the compressor runs, the fan runs. So I'm just going to install this fan motor back into the fridge now. Okay, this fan motor goes inside here, and they've got these little brackets for the electrical wires. You just clip your wire in there, and the existing wire went through like that, and there was a plug underneath where it plugged in, but I'm going to extend these wires onto the compressor and run it from there. The reason why we take this wire out of the way is it comes very close to the fan blade, so if it obstructs the fan from turning, it will jam the fan motor up. Now this just slides in here. You've got to put it on an angle to get it in here, and once it's in, at the bottom has got a few clips that holds it in, and there's one little screw that fits there. So we just got to line our clips up like that. That screw will go in there, and there's one little self-tapping screw that fits in there, and that is the little evaporator condenser fan motor. This is the tube from the drain, but I'll put that in later. Okay, this is the one screw that just fits in there, holds the bracket in place, and the second little screw is down here, but you can't get a straight screwdriver in, so you can either use a little, what I call a dumpy screwdriver, and tighten it this way, or you get a screwdriver on a swivel, but you can't get a straight screwdriver in on a straight to tighten that little screw. But that's fine, that little screw is in. This is the drain pipe, fits in there. When it defrosts, the water runs through there. So there the little 220 volt fan motor is in. I'm going to do the one on the inside now. Okay, I'm going to remove this fan from inside the freezer. There's a hole here with self-tapping screws that holds this plastic cover in. You undo the screws, and there's 2 screws down here which I've already taken out. This is how the fan comes out. There's a little screw inside there, which we'll keep, we'll put it in later. Exactly the same as the fan motor. I changed this now and I'm going to do exactly the same here. This one I'll try and pull the blade out in one piece. The other one broke when I took it out. Now this fan blade is just a push fit on there. It's friction to take it out, so I'll try and wedge it with the little pliers from the back, because I think they put a bit of Loctite or glue on it as well. There's 2 little screws here that holds the fan motor in place. Rotate it 180 degrees. Okay, but we'll have to loosen the wires in order to do that. There, the fan is out. Fan motor is in a little casing. Casing is held together with a little screw. It's got little clips here that holds it in position. Just unclip it, pull the fan out, and it's got a little plug here. Unplug the fan. These fans I take out here, I'm not going to throw them away. I keep them. Every now and then we get a fridge that needs a fan, and I've got an endless supply of these fans when I convert these fridges. This is a 8mm die. I put it on the shaft. Even though this it's plastic, we cut a little thread into the plastic, and I'm going to use a little nut to hold it on. Cuts very easily. That's what it looks like with the thread. So once I stick it through there, the nut I use, I get off the gas fridges, have a thermocouple, and those little thermocouples have little nuts, brass nuts holding it in, and they are 8mm thread. So they're a nice fit there. This is a little plate we get when we buy a thermostat, comes in a kit. And this hole is a very nice fit on the fan motor, and in here there's a half round, and if I cut this with a tin snips the right way, it's a nice fit in there. So what I do, I'll just first just cut the 2 ends off, and we trim it until it's a nice fit inside there. We stick the fan motor through from the bottom and put a nut on. It's just a little plate. Once I've cut it, I had to file and grind it a bit. But this little plate, I'll stick it in there, make it quite a tight fit. So there it's in. Fan motor we put behind. Now this cover is going to stand this way, so we have the little motor coil hanging down to the bottom. Stick it through the hole, and we put this little nut on here, which I took off thermocouple for a gas fridge. I have lots of these little brass nuts, and we just tighten that. If you tighten it too much, you break the plastic off, and if it's loose, then the motor wiggles around. Now normally they rubber mount these motors for the vibration, but these Aruki fans are so quiet, a little bit of vibration doesn't do anything. Okay, so there we go, our fan motor is mounted. I'll put the fan blade again. This is the wire for the old fan. So what I'm going to do is I'll link it up with this wire, and at the end where this wire comes out by the PC board, I'm going to have a defrost timer that switches this on and off, but I'll do the wiring a bit later on. I've unplugged all the electronic PC boards. So we got all these plugs here. These are the thin wires that normally run for this to the sensors. These are the thicker wires that for your defrost and that. This capacitor here is a motor start capacitor. For some reason Samsung puts the capacitor far from the compressor. But what I've done is, this is the mains 220 volt cord that comes in. From this plug there was a little low voltage transformer which I've disconnected, and I've put two terminals onto a 220 volt defrost timer. So when the power from the cord goes into the fridge, it goes onto your timer, and the timer motor will run continuously. Now from your timer, I would like this contact will be your defrost, and this one will run your compressor and both fans through a thermostat. The thermostat I'm going to put inside the fridge. Now there's a lot of spare wires that we're not going to use anymore, so I'm going to take two of these wires that run to a sensor inside the freezer and connect the thermostat onto it. I'll just show you inside. This is all the wires. Now these two here is your defrost element, and then you've got these three connections here, which is this one is purely a sensor. This one goes to a micro temp and another sensor. So these we're not going to use again. So I'm going to pick two of these wires and I'm going to mount a thermostat on the cover below the fan somewhere. The element, the defrost element, we're still going to use, but I'm going to run it through a defrost termination switch. And then we want two wires for the fan, but the fan plugs in the top. So we'll use, the old fan had 3 wires, we'll use 2 of the 3. So I'm just going to test and see which 2 wires here I can use that spare. And I'm going to mount the thermostat on. This is your fan cover, the way it fits. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a little hole here and put a thermostat behind here, and that thermostat will control the temperature. If you want to control the temperature, you're going to have to take a cover off, rotate your thermostat, and then put your cover back on again. But that's how I utilize the same connections for the new operating system. This is the little cord that plugs into the compressor. Here's your PTC starter and the overload, and this wire runs up and it plugs into the cabinet. Now the blue and the red is your power wire, and this pink and blue one goes to the capacitor. So what I've done is I've just spliced this wire in that I'm going to connect to the 220 volt fan. So you will get 220 volt from the fridge to your compressor, but I will send 220 to the fan I've put in. And then this I'll just tape it up and plug it in. This is the evaporator fan motor. I've connected the wires now. The 220 volt wires out. I've connected one on the white one and one on the black one, and there's a red one which I've just cut off there, which we're not going to use. And what I've done is where this black and white wire goes into the cabinet, where it comes out the other side, I've linked that to the compressor and the other fan motor. So when the compressor runs, this fan will get power and turn, and the other fan as well. So I'm just going to insulate this and put it back. These other 2 connections, this yellow and brown, is for your lights, which plugs in there, which we still use. I've intercepted those wires and I've given the light power through the light switch, so we have lights as well. This is a normal single door thermostat. I've connected the two connections onto this yellow wire, which was a sensor which fitted there. The sensor is still there. I'll just chop the wires off. So, and this thermostat will be inside the freezer. Now these two yellow wires, where they come out behind the fridge, let's go behind. It looks like a bit of a mess here, but the wires come out as a brown wire, which I've connected onto the defrost timer, and this blue wire. So from your defrost timer, your black is your power. We'll give power up to this brown wire, which turns yellow to your thermostat, comes back as a blue wire that will feed this blue wire here, which goes to your compressor, and the blue wire from the compressor is linked onto this fan here as well. So I think that's it for now. Just drill the hole through. I've mounted the thermostat here. This is the thermostat bulb. I'll just leave it there. It's going to pick up the ambient temperature. This is the sensor wire that's on there now. So now we can install it. So this sensor wire plugs in at the very bottom connection here. This wire for your fan motor and your light plugs into the top here. Plugs in like that, and then we put this cover back in its place, and then I will put the screws back in again, and this is where the light plugs in. So your temperature adjustment will be there, but there's going to be another cover over it, so this will not be visible. Okay, let me just find the thermostat knob. Fan motor is running now by rotating your thermostat. That's maximum. No, that's not. Okay, that is the off position. Now your fan stops. The fan behind also stops. And when your thermostat switches on, your fan switches on. So the fan will not work through the fans. You know, this used to be a fan switch, but the fan will just run during the cooling cycle when the compressor runs. The next thing to connect on the Samsung fridge is the defrost. Now there is a little diagram on the outside which tells you which wire works the defrost, and we'll pick that wire up from this harness here and connect it on the timer contact number 2. The common is the red wire, so all we need to do is connect the defrost onto that, and we'll have power on our elements. But now on this fridge there is a sensor that takes it out of defrost, which we've disconnected and used for thermostat, but they've got this, it's a micro temp, it's a thermal fuse, it's a fuse that blows on temperature when it gets too hot. So what I'll do is I'll cut these two wires off and put a defrost termination switch on here, so when the elements are hot enough and they've melted the ice, the defrost termination switch will switch the elements off. At the bottom I've connected the brown wire, which on the diagram shows the brown wire as the defrost. It's got 3 separate heating elements, and the brown wire goes directly to the 3 separate elements. So this will probably be the main defrost heater, and there's another wire, and this one splits, so it's obviously got a drain heater as well. And this thermal fuse, which plugs in the very top plug here, which I've put the defrost termination switch on now, actually breaks the common, which is the red wire, from the bottom, your live wire. So when it goes on defrost, we'll have power on all three elements. Once the ice is melted, this defrost termination switch will break the common and the element will stop. So the defrosts are connected as well. Now the only way to control the temperature in this fridge freezer will be this thermostat that I've mounted on this cover, which picks up the ambient temperature inside the fridge. I mean in the freezer. Now this hole that goes through here into the fridge side, some of the air will be blown through there, and that's what cools the fridge down. Now the fridge has vents all the way along this cover where the air comes out. Inside this compartment there's a damper, which is like a flap or a choke that allows either more or less air to come into the fridge to control the temperature. It had these buttons that controlled things. The little vent inside has a little servo motor that opens and closes it, so that will never work again. I will jam that vent in a position where we get a nice temperature. It might be a little bit too warm sometimes and a little bit too cold, but the main adjustment will be on the thermostat inside. The fridge is running now. If I put my hand over these vents, I can feel the air blowing out there. And on the fridge side, there's air blowing out here. So what I'll do is I'll run it with two thermometers and just see what temperature we get, and then I can either manipulate these vents to have either more or less air in here, and then in the freezer this cover just clips off, and then I can adjust on the thermostat behind there. Fridge has been running for just over an hour now. Fridge temperature is 3.8, got minus 14 in the freezer. So if this drops with another degree to 2.8 and we get to minus 15, then I'll leave the damper as it is and just let it cycle on the thermostat. After this fridge cycled a few times, the fridge was getting a bit too cold. It was going very close to 0 degrees and the freezer was hovering at about minus 15. There's the vent where the air comes from the fridge side. It enters into this styrofoam chamber here, and there is a vent inside here that opens and closes to make it bigger or smaller. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little piece of just normal styrofoam, cut it to the size and make this vent half the size. There's a little bit too much air coming in. I've covered half the vent with a piece of styrofoam, and I've used some white silicone just to glue it in position. We'll run it for a few hours and see what the difference is. There we get negative 18 in the deep freeze and 4.1. Compressor is cycled now. It goes to about minus 14 and then starts up and goes to minus 19. On the fridge side, that is with the vent half closed now. On the deep freeze side, the thermostat on maximum couldn't get to minus 18. I had to calibrate on the settings, but there's the Samsung fridge. Job is complete. I haven't put the shelves in yet, and both lights work. This touchpad doesn't work anymore, but 90% of the people don't care about that. They just want a working fridge back.